Welcome everyone to the Change Starts Here podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Odham, and today's guest is a woman that I got a chance to meet 11 years ago, almost to the day. And to say she changed the trajectory of my life would be an understatement. And to say that she changed the trajectory of many, many people's lives across the world would also be an understatement. Our guest today, if you know Franklin Covey education, you have to know Muriel Summers. She's the now retired, after 43 years of being an educator, she's now recently retired principal of A.B. Combs Magnet Elementary School, and where she created the first leadership elementary magnet in the country. Her school's been on national television, from PBS to Good Morning America, the Oprah Winfrey Show. For those of you, again, who've read our books, A.B. Combs is featured in the Stephen Covey's books, The Eighth Habit and The Leader in Me, and Muriel even co-authored the second Leader in Me book. So something else that I tease her about in today's interview is she now has a day named after her in her hometown. There's Muriel Summers Day, June 10th, 2021, which, again, if you know Muriel, you know that she does not need nor want the spotlight. She just enjoys doing the work. Today's conversation is awesome. Yes, I goad a little bit over her because she did, in fact, and has in fact changed my life. But we dive into some really fun topics, or interesting topics, I would say, in terms of how to find your why, how she found her why to be an educator that's driven her for 43 years. What are ways on those days where you don't feel like going to work, or it's just a really tough day? What are those secrets to re-energizing yourself to get your head back in the game and get back to work? Advice for how do you create positivity in your school, or how to keep school success when your school's having real success, how to keep positivity and high trust in the building. I dive in a little bit, like what kept her at Combs for 43 years. I mean, it's a long time. She's been in education. She obviously hasn't been at Combs for all of those, but a lot of folks who have had the success that she's had as a principal would have gone to the district office or other schools or other jobs. And so we dive into what kept her there. Overall, if you've ever met Muriel, it's a deep, rich conversation where you're going to walk away with wanting to take notes. So get your books, your notebooks out, your moleskins out, or your app that you have in your phone, because she definitely leads a lot of wisdom, as she always does. It's an awesome conversation. I feel so blessed and fortunate that we have her. Enjoy. Oh, also, before you get off, let me make sure I get the date right. Thursday, August 5th, there's a back to school event with Muriel. And if you want to register for that, go to www.leaderinme.org/events. Again, it's Thursday, August 5th. I'm looking at it mine. Looks like it's at 2 p.m. Central. So figure out what it is in your time zone. Enjoy this conversation. I believe it's something that some of it, if you've heard her speak before, you'll recognize. Hopefully some of it you've never heard before. It's some insight that you'll enjoy. And again, thank you for listening. We appreciate your continued support of our podcast. Enjoy. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you here. As I mentioned earlier, we met, again, I don't expect you to remember this. You probably remember where you're at that day, but we met August 11th, 2010. And the reason why that was memorable is I still have my notes 11 years later from what you talked about in your keynote. I have my notes because I snuck into your breakout, which was maxed out, but somehow I snuck into. And then in the midst of several hundred people, you still made time to talk to me when I had some questions about how do I serve the educators I was getting to work with. And so it is so awesome to be sitting here talking to you today on the podcast. Thanks for being here with us.
Oh, well, Dustin, the honor is all mine. And, I'm so touched that you remember when we had that conversation. And I certainly do remember our conversations over the years, and they've always been very special to me. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm going to do my best to not goat too much today, but I feel very blessed that you made time for us. So let's start. It's a question that we ask everybody. Who are you and what do you love about what you do?
Well, when you reach the age that I am and you're asked a question, is the one you just asked me, who I am, I think my most important role is mother, grandmother, educator, friend, sister. You think about your roles in terms of the relationships that are the most important to you. What I love so much about what I feel so blessed to say has been my life's calling is working on behalf of children and educators. And someone asked me as I recently retired on June the 30th, you know, why are you retiring? And, I said, well, 43 years of your life devoted to one thing. And when I reflect back on those 43 years, there was not one single time that I didn't love driving into a schoolhouse, driving into a campus. Were there hard moments? Absolutely. Were there times of discomfort and uncertainty? Yes. But when I can truly say that I never dreaded one single day. I was surrounded by precious children, amazing educators. And so for 43 years as a teacher, in the different roles I've played in education, I went to school as an adult. But I've been going to school for 60 years of my 65 because I was a student. So I have just loved school. I've loved being in school. And so I feel very blessed because I don't know too many people who can say that they loved every day of their career. And I really say that with such sincerity. No matter how difficult the moments, I could always leave my office. And see, I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about it. And I could run to children, and there would be a child that would hug me and say, I love you. And we would, it would make everything okay. So my life has been so blessed by being surrounded by children and some of the most amazing educators. And of course, my own two children and my new granddaughter that are the real joys of my life. That's who I am.
That's great. Well, I mean, as you can tell, I'm sitting here telling you about August 11th, 2010 of when we met. So the people who are blessed to have come across your path, you're changing their lives. So like, it's really refreshing to hear how much of an impact everybody's had on you. I just want to make sure you also know the type of impact you can have on people with just one tiny conversation. A question I didn't think I was going to be asking is, you were talking about driving to the schoolhouse. I remember as a first or second year teacher, there were times where, I was always excited to be in front of my kids, but there were some days, to your point, that it was just so tough that I actually drove past my school, driving down to the furthest bus stop where I would know I would see my students, and I would make sure that I had to turn around before then so that I didn't have to hear from them. And I'd have to put on a song. I had a couple of songs that I would go to like get my headspace right. Those days where you didn't feel like you had it, what are the tricks that you had to apply to your own self to make sure that you came with the right frame of mind that ultimately got you to the end of the day? Was like, that was the best decision I could have made. I love this job.
Yeah. I think we all find our ways to pump ourselves up, if you will. There were moments practically every day that I would put on some of my favorite music before I pulled into the schoolhouse yard. That would just get me happy and pumped up for the day ahead. But someone taught me that you keep a treasure chest of notes, cards, little mementos, if you will, from children and parents. And when you had a tough day, get that box out and open it up and read one of the letters. And, as I was packing up my office, I had 4 big boxes, if you will, decorative kind of boxes that were filled with notes from children for almost 40 years. And so I'm going to look forward to reading all of those again. But I would always reach in one of those boxes and pull something out that validated my efforts and sort of like little love notes from children and teachers. But, I've really have known my why in life. And I think when you know your why, no matter how tough the day may be, it will recenter you when you think about, what is your why? And why are you doing what you're doing? And that's always brought me back to the real joy of this work, is knowing that I'm doing what I feel very honestly I was called to do on this earth. So I'm blessed in that regard as well.
Have you always known like your why, as you call it, or have you always, as you talking about, retiring after 43 years as a educator, have you always known what you were called to do? And if not, when and how did you figure that out?
No, I didn't. I went to school to be a nurse, actually. And when I got into the clinical part of being in a hospital, I realized that was not what I wanted to do. My father had died when I was 10 years old. And for some reason, I felt that I wanted to be the kind of nurse to other people that I had witnessed nurses being to my father during his illness. But that was not, it only took me a little while to realize that was not really what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And if I may just say, I know exactly where I was at UNC Chapel Hill, where I sat on this rock wall. And for those of you who know the Carolina campus well, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I remember just asking the universe, if you will, to give me a sign, to tell me how I can make a distinct contribution in the world. And I remember sitting on that stone wall for I don't know how long, just having this conversation in my head. How can I best serve? How can I make a difference? All those little sayings we say to ourselves when we're faced with a tough decision. I got up from that wall, stone wall, and walked to Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. And as I was walking to Franklin Street, I passed a playground where children were playing. And there was such joy and such innocence in those encounters that day. And the children were like 4, 5, 6 years old. The teachers seemed happy. The children just seemed like just pure love and joy. And I took that as perhaps my sign was to serve in a different kind of way, and to serve helping to educate the hearts and minds of young children, rather than to serve in the capacity I had originally thought that I would, and that would be as a healthcare worker. So I've never looked back. That day, it's hard to describe. It really moves me to tears thinking back on that day, and this feeling I had that's indescribable. But I knew in that moment that was what I was supposed to do.
Can you imagine going back to that, thinking, I think I read somewhere your local mayor named June 10th, 2021 Muriel Summers Day. Can you imagine? Like, I know that's what's so cool is that there's no part of you that's ever done this for anything for yourself. And so the fact that this many years later, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's like, there's a Muriel Summers Day. It's not because people just like you. It's because you've made tremendous impact on the community you've been blessed to serve.
Well, I was quite honored and a little tickled by it all. So I don't really know what that means, but yeah. I just feel like I need to throw a party on that day. I don't know. You all come down and we'll have a big party like we do in the South. Yeah. But I'm very humbled and very honored, but it should be an A.B. Combs Day. And there is an A.B. Combs Day, by the way, but having the spotlight on me is is not fair, because what we achieved collectively as a school community, our teachers and community at large, it should be that kind of day, where, because it was not, one person doesn't make anything happen. It's the collective efforts and passions and hearts of many that were able to do what we've been able to accomplish at AB Coms.
Yeah, I've seen that type of, celebration. I mean, so award you've got a couple of times of just Principal of the Year. When you, as the leader, get a lot of recognition, it can cause friction within the school building or the district. What are some of the keys? And I can hear a little bit of it, but what are some of the keys and advice you have for leaders as their school is getting successful, they're getting rewarded for it, where they make sure it doesn't cause problems and friction in the culture that they've built?
Well, I hope that what I have been able to do over the years, and the staff knows this about me, I don't ever accept any kind of accolade without giving the credit to those who deserve it the most. And I'm somewhat embarrassed by it, to tell you the truth, and extremely uncomfortable. I have loved AB Combs being in the spotlight. I have worked hard to help lead and champion the work that we do. But again, it's all of us. It's our children, it's our parents, it's the bus drivers, it's our child nutrition workers, it's all of us. I have perhaps been the face of the work, but it's been all of us collectively. And so what I say to that is that never, ever forget, as my father would say, who brought you to the table, and always keep them there with you too. And so the staff, I feel, knows that I share any awards and accolades with them, and with the children. And never, awesome. Ever forget that.
I'm positive anybody who's followed your career or listens to you talk or pays attention to your writing, that is always incredibly clear about your heart for how you got there. It was never you, it's always everybody else. One question that I thought of this morning, I'm like, God, most people who have had the success your school has had would have moved on to another school, moved on to a district office, moved on to another opportunity. That seems to be the culture of today. What is it that kept you at AB Combs in the midst of what I have to assume were numerous opportunities that were probably enticing in terms of just the intellectual opportunity to go do it? What kept you at AB Combs?
Well, Dustin, I had an incredible opportunity before Dr. Covey's passing. This work had just started to gain momentum, and yes, I was being offered other things that made more money, had more opportunity, that I, at that time, I thought had more opportunity. And I remember asking him, Dr. Covey, when you have to make a difficult decision, what are the questions you ask yourself that would guide you to the answer you're seeking? And how blessed was I to have been guided, if you will, by his response. And his response has been what has guided me over the past 15 years. And he said, always ask yourself, where are you the happiest? Where do you feel you can make the most distinct contribution? And how can you best serve? And so those questions guided me. Where am I the happiest? Always surrounded by children. Where do I feel I have the greatest circle of influence or can make the most distinct contribution? I knew that was working within side of a schoolhouse, surrounded by passionate, like-minded individuals who wanted to make a difference. And what kind of service? Well, my goodness, the service of being with children every day and helping to guide them, you know, there was my answer. And, you know, I think when you can base your answers, base your decisions based on your value system and the response to those three questions, it's really a no-brainer. You know, I have no regrets for what I've turned down, no regrets whatsoever. And to have ended my career the way I did was exactly the way I wanted to. I wanted to end it like I began it. And I have been very blessed to have worked for a school district that allowed me to stay in the same school for as long as I did. And Dustin, that doesn't happen everywhere.
No.
But what I realize is worked very hard to have a succession plan. And if I gave any advice during this podcast to educators, is to have a succession plan. Because when someone leaves an organization, you should never feel their absence if you've done a good job, because things will just continue and keep going to the next level with the new administrator in charge. But that doesn't happen without careful and thoughtful planning. My successor will be named hopefully in a couple of weeks. It's still not sure who that will be, but it didn't go without effort on my part to begin planning for my exit, and nurturing and grooming others to be able to be in a position to just keep the beat going, if you will. I'll know what kind of job I did as school administrator if Combs continues to flourish and thrive.
What are the, when you talk about a succession plan, I mean, a lot of folks be like, I have a list of names of people that could be good, but what are the key components if I'm sitting there thinking that through? Again, what I hear from you is a succession plan is not, don't put it together just when you're thinking there could be a transition. Have it ready to go and be thinking about it always while you're leading, even if you never go. Is that what I hear?
Well, that's correct. I mean, I think our role as leaders, especially in Leader in Me, in a Leader in Me environment, is to empower other people to be decision makers, to take risk, to find out what their hopes and dreams are. So, you know, I've been blessed that there have been people at Combs that wanted to be school administrators. So I brought them to the table whenever I could to experience as much as I felt that they needed to experience to be ready for a role in school administration if they chose to do that. But succession planning is, I think, extremely important, but it should be really the cornerstone of what we do in Leader in Me schools, developing everyone to be leaders in what they're passionate about. And then they go from there. I mean, my goodness, the pandemic was probably one of our finest hours as a school, because we had to collectively say, tell me what you feel most comfortable doing. Tell me what you feel most comfortable doing. And we had to get out of people's way to help keep things running. I mean, what that staff did at Combs, and as staffs, I'm sure all over this country and world did during this pandemic, was nothing less than heroic to keep things going. But we had to utilize the talents and gifts of everyone. And I loved that. I said, this should be something that we don't have to have an emergency for to make happen every single day. So I think in many regards, I was planning for my exit long before the pandemic happened. But the pandemic, I think, helped everyone realize we're going to be okay, because we know how to lead and we know how to serve. And we did that for almost 13 months. So I'm very proud of what we've done.
So, I mean, there are people who listen to this who maybe not be as familiar with Leader in Me schools or Leader in Me itself. But when you think about your school, especially facing challenges like that, and you say, oh, Leader in Me school should have a succession plan. A Leader in Me school should be able to adapt and adjust to those challenges that a pandemic can bring, what's the foundation that helped you guys really navigate the tough times?
Well, it was our operating system, if you will, that is based on the 7 habits of highly effective people. You know, the gift there are these 7 habits. And Dr. Covey would always say that the habits are at their best when they're presented with a problem that they need to solve. And so we looked at proactivity in a whole different light, as well as beginning with the end in mind. This isn't going to last long. You know, our school counselor used this graphic with our children and said, when you look at your whole span of life, this is only a tiny fraction of your whole entire life. So let's take a look at what's happened and learn from it and grow from it and look at, the gifts that will come out of this. And so when she said that, I thought she's so right. And shame on us if we don't, if we go back to the way things were, rather than moving forward with a sense of what we've learned from during the pandemic. But we learned a lot, and the habits were our foundation for everything that we did, every decision we needed to make. We used the language which grounded all of us. So we had this common language of abundancy, of, here's our private victory, here's our public victory, put first things first. And so honestly, Dustin, I don't know that we would have been able to say when we started to see the light at the end of the tunnel that we would have felt we were as successful as we were had we not had that as our core, if you will, as the fabric of our school. It's woven into everything that we do, but it was enhanced because of this challenge in ways that I think only those of us who lead in schools with this as our operating system can truly understand collectively. It really was our finest hour.
When you think about the habits versus, I've worked with a number of schools that have, the character trait of the month or some sort of character education program. What's the difference from your perspective of, or what's the power or uniqueness of the habits versus anything else when you think about the operating system?
Yeah, I have such respect for all of the programs, if you will, that are out there that support the character development of young children. But I speak as someone with 43 years of experience that nothing we do should be like a flavor of the month, if you will. We're going to stop this month and we're going to focus on responsibility, or in the next month, we're going to focus on this, and the next month that. This ubiquitous approach of teaching character through the lens of everything that goes on in a schoolhouse is one of the reasons I stayed at Combs for as long as I did. I remember saying to someone once who had offered me a position, and I said, show me something better than what I have and we might talk. But what we had at Combs was this ubiquitous approach that we taught leadership through the lens of everything that we did, through the curriculum, through performances, through the daily interactions. And that's why it sticks. That's why it works. But it takes intentionality, being very intentional and deliberate about the work, and to put it on the front burner of everything that needs to be taught, not on the back burner, not a lesson a day for 4 days a week, but this ubiquitous approach of every day, every minute, where children are being exposed to the work. It makes a huge difference. Huge difference.
So it seems to me like we keep talking about, because you just retired, your 43 years in education, it seems to me that your meeting Dr. Covey was one of the most pivotal, not the, but one of the most pivotal moments in your education career. Is that correct?
I would absolutely say yes. Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think a lot of us, reading the books or listening to other podcasts, interviews that you've done, can kind of dive into that awesome story of you meeting him and how it led to Leader in Me. I'm actually curious of if there are other circumstances or people in your life that you've met that built you into today. Like it's just those kind of serendipitous moments that, like, man, as I reflect back, who knew that that would be a force of change in my life?
I think we're all destined to meet the people we meet along life's journey. I, you know, at the age I am, I certainly didn't realize this in my 40s. Started to realize it a little bit in my 50s, but certainly during my 60s, everything that happened to me in life, single mom, 2 children, 5 and 7 years old, being assigned the principal of A.B. Combs when it needed major transformation, all of those things happening at the same time. And I look back and think, how in the world? But it was by design, no doubt, no doubt. Everyone I have met in life, the experiences that I have shaped me into the person that I am today.
So when you took over AB Combs, you were a single mom of two, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, you said?
Mhm.
Holy cow. What were some of the keys personally, not professionally, but personally, kind of fighting through that? Because it's being a principal or even being a teacher is all encompassing. And so it's with you all the time. So it's tough to stop and be like, okay, time to be a parent now. What were some of the things that you brought into your life at that time so you can manage and thrive in both aspects of your life?
My children are so incredible. They were incredible at 5 and 7 years old, and they're incredible now. They went to school with me. And I was very blessed that I worked for an area superintendent. And I said, Dr. Mobley, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And, I was embarrassed that, here I am in this position and I'm faced with, this Dear John letter on my kitchen table. Going to be leaving, and, what in the world am I going to do? What am I going to do? How, that's when I met Dr. Covey. And, it just seems like that with every challenge, looking at it as an opportunity was what helped me survive all of that.
Mm.
This is an opportunity. You don't know it yet. You haven't seen it yet. But, when a parent sat across the table from me and said, I'm going through this. My wife has just left me. I could have empathy in ways that had I not had that experience, I wouldn't have been able to. My children understood what I was trying to do. And I was even as young as they were, I was very honest with them about what life had thrown us. But we were going to catch it, and we were going to run with it, and we were going to be okay. But I was going to need their help. And so they went to school with me on Saturdays and Sundays. And I let them bring their bicycles, and they rode their bicycles in the hallway.
That's actually pretty cool.
They learned how to use the intercom system. It was things that I had to do as a mom to sort of balance it. But, we survived, and we were okay. And so I think when you look back on the highs and lows of life, we're all going to have them. The highs, there's a high and then there's a low, and then there's a high and then there's a low. And I think that's the rhythm of our lives. But if you can look at each of those lows as opportunities to grow and challenges to embrace, you just ride that wave out, because it will eventually ride itself out, and you'll come out on the other side wiser, certainly for me, I've made so many mistakes, Dustin, but I'm wiser.
I find that hard to believe, but I'm going to ask you about them.
I've made a lot, trust me, but I've learned from them. And I think that was one of the things I wanted our students to know, as was said to me, it matters not where you come from or how much money's in your pocket. What matters is the size of your hopes and your dreams, because within you, you have the ability to make anything that you dream become true. And that was, in so many ways, my daily mantra to the students and to the teachers, to seize the moment, to ride that wave out, and to know that you are so much more than what you think you're capable of doing. And, Dr. Covey always said the best is ahead of us. I'm counting on that to be true, that my best is ahead of me.
Well, as someone who I think I'm going to personally and professionally benefit of getting more of you, I can tell you there's a lot of impact, life and world impact that you're going to get a chance to have now that you've got a little bit more time to share your love and your message with folks. So I can say yes. I don't know if you'll see it or feel it yet because it's still raw, but I can see it. Before we wrap up here, I am curious because that's to go through that personal challenge right before you're about to become a principal is just devastating in many ways, and so I think it's a story that a lot of people don't know. When you think back to your career, is there a failure or a mistake or a challenge that you can think back? You're like, now with perspective, now that we're out, where you're like, man, that at the time I thought life was over and it turned out to be this great blessing over time, right? Like, I'd be curious to know what those were if you had them in your career.
Oh, I made tons of mistakes, every single day. And certainly one of the greatest professional blessings I was ever given was being appointed the principal at Combs. Yes, I messed up as a principal. Oh my goodness. And that's why the term pre-forgive someone has such meaning for us at Combs, because I messed up on a lot of things, handling parents differently, handling children differently. Now I wish that I had asked more questions, that I had sort of peeled back the layer of the onion, if you will, because we all have our own personal stories. And sometimes you don't know what those are, and you judge way too quickly. And you assume things that are so inaccurate. And so I learned at a very late stage in my career the importance of listening, being better listeners, trying to get to the root of what's going on with someone. We respond out of two emotions, fear and love. And so if we can just remember that, that's a guiding principle, if you will, for me. Oh, but yes, did I make mistakes? Tons of them. But also knowing my why brought me right back to why I was doing, what I was doing. I have been so fortunate to have worked for people that forgave me for my mistakes. And I learned to say, you're sorry. I learned very quickly the power of not trying to cover anything up, not trying to blame someone else, but to take ownership, and say that you're sorry, you regret what happened. You'll try not to make that same mistake again. And that's why I think I remained as a principal as long as I did, because I did mess up every day, but I learned how to say I'm sorry, and I'll try not to do that again. And that would be my advice, to always be honest, to be as transparent as you can possibly be, and to humble yourself to ask for forgiveness. And it works.
Yeah, one of my notes that I've kept here And I'm going to go through them real quickly from 11 years ago. So I had pre-forgiveness on there. I had fall in love with teaching, because I was overseeing some teachers then. I wanted to make sure that they really understood that that's got to be something they were passionate with. I love that we talked about children will meet the expectations that are set for them. I know these are ones that are really true to your heart, because I like wrote down, like when I could just feel your like soul reach out, I'm like, God, I got to make sure I pay attention to that. One of the things that my wife is now the chief of staff for her school district, but she was the director of talent. I gave her this quote again from 11 years ago, just a reminder of like, you said, you can teach anyone pedagogy of teaching, but you can't teach them the love or the passion of which to do. And so that's something that I really took to heart. And the last thing, I don't want to, there is a Miss Rose story that I'm sure you said 1,000 times, but selfishly for me, and maybe the few folks who have not heard it, like I would love to just have a small version of why did I write down Miss Rose's name? And it was something, why was she was in my notes 3 or 4 times that day.
Oh, I can hardly say her name without crying. And I've told the story so many times, but I think it speaks to the power of an educator that truly loves children. I grew up in rural North Carolina, the granddaughter of a cotton farmer, where most of the children in our community were sons and daughters of farmers or mill workers. And so our futures outside of just staying in that community just really weren't there for us unless we had parents who showed us something differently. And fortunately for me, I had a mother who did that. But Miss Rose also did that for us on a daily basis through the lessons that she taught us and the places she said we could go one day. And, she made everything come alive for us. But she also believed in us. I have story after story, but the one that's the most compelling is the one when our class all came together to honor her. And this was at her passing. But, we realized in that moment that Miss Rose told everyone that we were her favorite students. She said, "Oh, Muriel, you're my favorite student." And then she would say to Johnny, "Johnny, you're my favorite student." She would say to Vicky, "You're my favorite student." And none of us knew that she told the other that, but she made us all feel that we were. I realized then the incredible opportunity educators have to do one of two things. You can either leave your heart print on a child that will last a lifetime, or you can leave a scar, an open wound, if you will, that will never heal. And I had teachers that fell into those two camps. One, Miss Rose, who made us all feel that anything was possible, and the daily messages of you were special, you were loved, you were destined to do great things with your life, still remain on the hearts of all those students she taught. And then others who said, "I can't see you amounting to too much," or "Why can't you get this?" or "What's wrong with you? Why can't you learn this?" And a counselor that I had who did not feel that I would be college bound at that point in time in my life. And when I told her that I had gotten in to UNC Chapel Hill, her response to me was, there must be some mistake. And all these years later, those words still bring tears to my eyes. And it's an open wound that has never, ever healed. But how grateful am I to the teacher that made that comment to me? Because I was out to prove her wrong and still am out to prove her wrong. But I also said if I was ever in a position of leadership in a school, I would make sure that I would never have anyone on a staff in which I served that would ever say anything to a child that would leave, and I knew about it, that would leave a scar like that. And I can say I have surrounded myself with the most amazing teachers who were far better teachers than I ever was. But they leave daily heart prints. And all you got to do is call up our students and they'll tell you about those amazing teachers. So I was shaped very much by Miss Rose, having Miss Rose as my teacher. But I was also shaped very much by having a counselor that didn't believe in me. And so with that, I think there are many lessons to be learned. And the one thing I'll end on as we close out our conversation is just to say that there's no other occupation, which is why I stayed in what I stayed in for as long as I did. You know, I hope that long after I'm gone, there will be a child that will say, Muriel Summers made a difference in my life. Because when that can happen, long after your passing, you're living on through the lives of the people that you've touched. And that's the great gift of being a teacher, that you will live on in the lives of the children you've taught if you've done a good job. And that should be all of our goals, to have people say that one day about us.
Well, Muriel, I can say one thing for sure. The notes that I took from that August day, August 11th, again, 2010, I came back and shared them with my wife, and she could just see the joy in my face and see how inspired I was to see you with that common vision of what I felt to be true, but also you to give clarity and direction to it. It's what brought me to Franklin Covey and allows me to stay here 10 years later. And so when you talk about your why, every day I wake up and it's a why that, yes, we know Dr. Covey was a part of, but had you not had the vision and courage that you have, I wouldn't be here. And I can at least just thank you for me and the people I've been able to touch, which hopefully are thousands through it. It's because of you. So just know that that's never, you talk about people who brought you to the table, that is never lost on me, not one day. And so I just thank you for who you are, how you love, how you lead. And selfishly, while I know it's tough to make this transition, as I keep saying, I am so glad I get more of a front row seat to see more of the life-changing work that you're going to be doing here in the future.
Well, Dustin, thank you. And you have impacted my life in so many wonderful ways. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for this opportunity to spend time with you today. Your podcasts are wonderful. I wish you so much luck and best wishes in this chapter in your life as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We'll definitely have you back on again in the near future. So Muriel, thank you so much. It was a blessing, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Love you, Dustin. Thank you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, podcast on Apple or Spotify, and help us celebrate the beautiful, messy work of shaping human potential.